Showtime.
Okay, should I close the?
Yeah, bring everyone into the breakout in from the outside, and I'll just lead off here and sort of introduce you, and then Robert, you can go on and just give a little bit of background.
Okay.
All right.
Sometimes we have trouble getting people out of the breakout room. They get all involved and
Those conversations maybe get very intense at times, or
Good.
Mhm. I think I need a facelift.
Don't we all?
I think you can force them out. Can you? Oh, there's, all right, great. Thanks for spotlighting. Gonna have Roberts on there too.
Okay.
All right, is everyone in?
We're all on
Yes,
the
and
call.
we were introducing ourselves, Peter, and
Yes, indeed.
we didn't get around to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll have some time after we speak with Robert, but if I could ask you all to mute yourselves at this time, it'll make the conversation a little bit easier. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out on this beautiful day to meet again with our fellow alumni. We're very lucky here to have Robert Greenwald as our guest. He's alumni, I believe, 1966. If you did your homework and clicked on some of the links from the invite, you'll know a little bit about Robert, but we'll get into a little bit more detail during the call. So Robert, welcome.
Thank you.
You want to give your little elevator pitch about yourself, and so people know?
I don't think I actually have an elevator pitch, but I will say attended Antioch, which is why I was invited by Peter. Thank you, and the others who are helping to make this happen. I worked, after leaving Antioch, I worked in the commercial theater in New York for several years, off Broadway, and then graduated to off Broadway. Then came to Los Angeles, where I was hired to direct plays at the Mark Taper Forum and help start a new program of experimental plays. Had 1, 2 plays, shows, musicals that went on to New York and to Broadway. And then years ago, I left the Mark Taper Forum and started a film and TV company with Frank von Zernick, who was a fellow alumni from the High School of Performing Arts. And it was called Moonlight Productions because we literally were moonlighting from our job at the Taper, where we would drive around in his little car and use payphones and try to get people to consider our film and TV productions. And eventually we were able to break into commercial television, which is hard when you don't have connections and you don't have money, but we did that and did it ultimately quite successfully, to the point where right around 9/11, right at 9/11, and I saw the horrors that were happening, where many people in our country were desirous of rage and revenge and punishment. It almost seemed that it didn't matter. And I made the decision right around then to leave commercial film and television. I fortunately had been very successful and also well paid when you work in that world. So I could leave and become essentially a full-time, non-paid volunteer. And over time, it led to my founding Brave New Films, which is a social justice media company where we do full-length documentaries, we do short documentaries. They're all free, and they cover the spectrum of subjects from mass incarceration to income inequality to the wars. And I was been able to travel to Afghanistan and Pakistan and around the country interviewing gun survivors and people who've been abused by the carceration system, by the Koch brothers. And now it's an active social media company called Brave New Films, which brings us where we are today.
Yeah, well, it seems like you really strived and succeeded to win some victories for humanity. So I really like to thank you for that.
Thank
A
you.
lot of us sit here and dream, and maybe we vote, or maybe we call out and do some volunteering. But I think you've definitely had a huge, huge impact. So we thank you for that. But so what? I guess let's go back, and what made you decide to go to Antioch? What led you, or what in your family or background presented that?
I think it was the work-study program that was appealing to me. I'm not sure why, but it was something about, I guess it's still consistent when I try to talk my employees out of going back to graduate school and other things. I've always learned best by the practical experience of being in a work situation. And maybe I had some awareness of that back, 150 years ago when I was at Antioch, that I would learn more by being engaged practically than by exclusively sitting in a classroom. And that's been, I think, a consistent theme or learning for me over the years. It can be much more painful, right? Because you make mistakes and you fall on your face and you're not as protected as you might be in a classroom. But I think that's an invaluable contribution that the Antioch ethos, culture really contributes, those of us who had spent time there.
So I think you mentioned you graduated from the High School of Performing Arts. Is that true?
Yes.
So did you come to Antioch knowing that you wanted to go into media or performance, or what was your major, I guess, at that time?
I think my major ultimately was history. I don't think I knew what that I wanted to do. I just knew that when I showed up there, and then Friday night when I saw the folk dancing in the square, I was in heaven to be able to participate in this wonderful communal experience in the best sense of the word. But
so that was in 63,
60, let's see, I went 61 to 63.
Okay.
I actually dropped out of Antioch, not because of it, but it turns out to be the day before Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah, I think that's I'm a little bit younger than you, but that's sort of when my world expanded, or I became aware of the world. That's a point in my life that I think that's when I started thinking, wow, this world, I'm not just my little 5-year-old, fifth grader or so, this is the whole world out there. So did you, well, when you were at Antioch, what kind of co-ops did you do?
I did two. I did one where I worked at Boston Memorial Hospital, where I was an orderly. Now, I have no idea why I did that. I'm terrified of hospitals. I'm still terrified of hospitals. I'm terrified of death. I hate holding and carrying bedpans. But I think I thought somehow it would help me learn, and I suppose it did. But the visceral experience of wrapping up a body and putting it on a gurney, I can still feel it in my hands back when I did it. And then the second job was closer to where I was moving. It was working for a theatrical agent named Toby Cole, who represented a lot of really good progressive folks, including Eric Bentley, who did the translations of Bertolt Brecht, and There was an off-Broadway production of Macbeth, which got a lot of attention back then because it took the Macbeth and turned it into Lyndon Johnson. So I felt myself moving closer and closer to where I really wanted to be. And then ultimately I dropped out of Antioch because I had an opportunity to be an off-Broadway assistant for Vinette Carroll, who's been my teacher at Performing Arts. And she was now directing an off-Broadway musical called Trumpets of the Lord.
Well, you know, I've noticed here now, maybe it's because I just moved to LA about 5 years ago and just, you know, got together with the Antioch alumni, but it seems like Antioch has a disproportionate number of filmmakers, you know, and filmmakers that have been very successful, and not only filmmakers, but people in the visual arts. We had Victoria Hochberg on here.
Yeah.
We're going to have Peter Crossman here in the next month or so. Do you think that there's something, or do you have any explanation for that? Why do you think we have so many successful visual artists?
I don't know. You know, I could come up with all hypotheticals, but I mean, Antioch is non-traditional. People in the arts tend to be non-traditional, just in general. And again, I go back to the co-op experience, which is not the usual academic track if you want to become a lawyer or a doctor or some of the clearer professions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with you might not know what you know, you go out to a co-op, you really don't know anything about what you're doing there. But at the end of the co-op, you realize that, well, just because I didn't know anything at one point, I can learn how to do something. And it's like, you don't have to be given the instructions. It's like, you want to do something, you can go out there and somehow you can show up in a city, not know anybody, right? And after 3 months, you know 150 people, you've got all these skills you didn't have before. And boy, that's a confidence builder. You know, I think not everybody is prepared to do that in their real life.
Yes, very, very true.
So your latest, let's talk a little bit about the Brave New Films, because you know, so many of us want to do something, right? And so many of us want to you know, maybe help our friends understand problems, right? And I think that the films that the filmography that you have there is wide and very to the point of highlighting what's going on in society here. So your recent film, I don't know if we should go back from your current film backwards or from a past film forward. I guess what do you think in your past repertoire, what was the most influential film that you produced, or your favorite?
Yeah,
or you know,
it's like, which one of your children do you like the most, love the most? It's hard to know. I would say, you know, that different, but certainly when we did the film about Fox News, Fox many years ago, that got a tremendous amount of attention, partly because at that point, Fox didn't have their attack act together, so they attacked me by name, and you know, that got all kinds of lots of insults from Bill O'Reilly and other high-class folks. But it was useful in helping spread the word. Then when
they spelled your name right.
Yes.
Right?
Then when we went after the Koch brothers, they attacked me and took out ads, you know, with my picture on social media. You know, I'm never going to win awards for, you know, being the handsomest person in the world, but they made me look even worse. You know, they darkened the photo and put it up. So the Koch brothers film. Hello?
Yeah, for sure. They always.
Oh, I thought you were saying something to me. No,
Yeah,
no.
no, I was.
Okay. And then when I went to Afghanistan at the the war situation and was able to film there, and when I went to Pakistan and met drone survivors, and then the voter suppression work that we did, when we felt it was important to call people's attention to it, and then most recently racially charged about the misdemeanor system and all the fact that 12 to 13 million people are in the system, primarily Black, brown, and poor people, for things that you and I would never be cited for. And in the middle of that film, this is where I love documentaries, in the middle of working on Racially Charged, the police murders started becoming more and more public, thanks to these wonderful things. And we realized that misdemeanors were often the gateway for police brutality and murders. So we shifted and added that into the film itself, which again, with documentaries, one is able to do. So it's a long answer to say I probably don't have, oh, and then we did a short piece on the women who Trump had accosted and sexually they called names and reached out to and did all kinds of stuff. And that got a tremendous amount of attention. So, and that was 3 minutes long, and we got just a tremendous large scale response and a lot of media attention. So it's been across the board. For me personally, I would say the most satisfying work is the systemic work, where we're able to explain it's not just that Walmart does bad things, it's based on a system of profiteering and greed that justifies it. It is systemic. With the drones, there were terrible innocent people were being killed and talking to their relatives in Pakistan, but the drones were not the answer, the only problem. The problem is the notion that we can solve complicated issues by bombing, strafing, or droning people. So that's the work. It's still imperfect. Every time we do a film, we struggle with how to make it human, how to put a face on policy, and yet not make it a preachy homework or eat spinach because it's good for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed in the films that I've been able to view that you not only present the problem, but the causes for the problem, but also solutions for the problem, right? From, whether it's helping with voter registration, which I think, boy, you ought to recycle that some way, because we're going to be faced with worse problems, coming up in 2022. They're putting in Republican secretaries of state and in those states, and there's just, that's I think gotten even 10 times worse than it was in 2020.
Yes, we're trying to, when we did the first one, and this is the beauty of a nonprofit, originally the voter suppression first was going to be a short video. And then as we started doing the research and the associate producers and the researchers kept coming into my office with these really horrific stories, the power of the stories grew and grew, and the scope of it grew and grew. And we wound up, instead of a 5-minute piece, doing a 35-minute piece, and working with Stacy and Fair Fight and ACLU and all kinds of terrific groups. And then did an updated version of that. And we're now fundraising to try to do Suppress 2022 because of exactly what you said. The problem is worse than it's ever been. And it's important to arouse people, not just to be pissed off, but to arouse people to take action.
I think that's the beauty, that you offer advice on how to counteract that. And I really hope that, I've done a lot in the previous, or not enough, but I've done some stuff in 2020, and I'm really gearing up to be more active in 2022. I mean, I'm suggesting that people, everyone who can possibly move to Georgia and set up residency do that. I think that's going to be the most effective thing, is just to get more people living there who might vote, along those lines. But if not that, then, telephone banks and postcards, I think all those venues, every little bit helps.
Well, that's the beauty of having the films be for free, because everyone can use the films. I say often when I'm speaking and things that you can forward a film to a friend,
That's right.
to a relative you don't even like.
Mhm.
And it's on, we spend more time on distribution now than actually on the content itself. But we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Instagram stories, we're on TikTok. We have an educators program. We have thousands of teachers around the country who screen it. We have a faith program. We work with a lot of advocacy groups. So the days of sort of, making a film and that's it, at least from a social justice point of view, that would be malpractice, for us. Oh, we've just making arrangements with some libraries around the country, bookstores as they're opening up now, co-ops. So there's a tremendous opportunity because the films are free, but it requires people like you and everybody on this call to utilize the tool if they find it effective and helpful.
Well, you were sort of very early. You and your group were able to leverage the internet. I think you were you were crowdfunding before there was
Yes.
crowdfunding.
Out of desperation, we couldn't finish the movie Iraq for Sale about war profiteering, and Jim Gilliam came into my office and he suggested we try to raise money. And I said, that's a crazy idea. Why would anybody give us money for a film that isn't even finished, that they haven't seen? And then he said, well, there's this new thing and it's called YouTube. And if you put clips up, you can get people to watch the clips and maybe even give you some money. I remember this so clearly. I said, and I looked at YouTube and it was primarily cats dancing on pianos.
Oh, very important.
Yeah, and women partially naked falling in the shower. So I thought, this doesn't exactly seem like where you would put a clip about war profiteering. But we did. And then 2 days later, I never forget it, he walked in and there were 8,900 people that looked at it. And I'm thinking, 8,900 people, that's a huge audience. And, now, fortunately, we're able to get hundreds of them.
Yeah, I read someplace that you've had like 50 million views of your, I don't know if that's it's more than that. Yeah, I probably read an old article, but that's an incredible outreach. That's really leveraging the platform. So your latest one that you've released is the what's the name? I'm sorry.
Racially charged, America's misdemeanor problem.
Yeah, so that's an incredibly timely topic, especially since today is June 19th. I've always felt that misdemeanors and such were really, like you say, disproportionately applied to women to people of color. I always joke to my friends that, well, I'd never be arrested for that, we had Charles Rosenberg, I believe, he's an author. He was on a guest here early on, I think our first guest, and he wrote a book on Abraham Lincoln and slavery. And I guess I hadn't read anything about that in years. And in his book there were these slave policemen that could like just arrest people and say, oh, I've caught this is an escaped slave. And well, I guess the whole justice system really turned around as brought out in your documentary too, that this whole misdemeanor, all these jaywalking, vagrancy laws, they were really, I don't want to give away the plot of your documentary, but I really think everyone who, if you haven't seen that documentary yet, follow that link and look at it, because it's really eye-opening. Most Antioch, I know several people have been arrested from Antioch, but I don't think any of us really, ever felt that same oppression. But I'd be glad to hear stories of people who did. So we sort of covered about what's the next, where do you get your ideas from, I guess, and what's the next idea you're working on?
Well, the decision about what not to do is one of the key parts of my job. Every time we decide to do something, whether it's long, medium, or short, it means we're not doing another 10, 20, 30 things because we're a very small company and its capacity and fundraising is always very, 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 very difficult to keep. I'm able to volunteer, fortunately, because I worked in commercial world for a while, but the rest of the staff needs to get paid, even if it's not competitive with the commercial world. So deciding to do something is a big deal. And there are a couple of things that come into the decision. Number one is basically something that isn't being done or isn't being done in a particular way. So for example, I remember so well, Jane Mayer's article on the Koch brothers came out in the New Yorker. I read it. I was flabbergasted. I was passionate, and I felt, how could we do something about these brothers whose name no one could pronounce? I remember sitting in our office. And that undertook 2 years of working, finding the stories and telling that story that hadn't been told. And then we wound up with a premiere in Washington, D.C. with Reid and Pelosi and Bernie Sanders, and it I hope was helpful in calling attention to the Kochs and to dark money in general. When we did the drones, that was, at the time, the Obama administration was new. People were assuming that drones had this magical ability just to find bad guys. It didn't make any sense to me, but all the reporting, or virtually all the reporting, was frankly horrible. It was saluting the drones. Oh, it's great. No lives are endangered, and just didn't ring true. So with time and research, and by going to Pakistan, and then bringing drone survivors here to testify in front of Congress.
You actually had hearings in front of Congress, right? That's
I remember being in
leverage,
Pakistan, and I was interviewing a school teacher and his beautiful children, and he was talking about his mother, these children's grandmother, and the casting gene or ability from commercial TV hit me. I said, if we could bring him and his children to testify, even if you were the most enraged person, it would be very hard to say he in fact is a danger to our safety. So we were able to do that. That was an idea that hadn't been done. People were furious. We lost funding because it was highly critical of the Obama administration. We got hate letters from our own email list, which, by the way, for any of you who are interested in getting the films on a regular basis, you can sign up on our email list. You can sign up on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. Any of you who are on TikTok, I'd be interested to see, because the demographic is that's for people who are too young for Instagram. It's TikTok. But there's lots of ways. So the decision is hard, and then when we make the film, we then slice and dice it so that it's available on the different platforms. So, for example, on Racially Charged, it's 35 minutes, but we have shorter versions and excerpts on Instagram stories, on TikTok. We have the full version on YouTube, and then we have clips that are constantly used on social media to connect to the issues of the day. And I have a brilliant young guy who does all that not all of it. He does the social media piece.
Yeah, that's you've assembled quite a team. I know how hard it is to even just keep up with my weekly or my monthly mailings here. I can't imagine how much effort it must take to prepare that all and to put it out there and to keep it fresh. So kudos to your team there. But about how many people do you have working with you?
Well, we just had to do a significant cutback because, the good news, Trump is gone. The challenge was I made a decision to go into our savings. So we did, I think, 25, 26 pieces, but it took our savings down quite a bit. So sadly, we had to reduce from what had basically been around 19, 20 people. Now we're around 10, which is certainly a struggle. We are working on one new film now already, and hopefully, as people see Racially Charged, and hopefully we'll be able to raise some money for Suppressed 2022. We'll be able to add 1 or 2 bodies. Makes a huge difference just adding 1 person or 2 people, because you can get so much more done.
Well, I see that you do have like at least a link on your website for internships or fellowships. I understand that they're not available right now, but I would think that you might find 1 or 2 people from Antioch who would love the opportunity to work with you. So I'll pass your name on to our development office there and see if they can maybe work out something. I know it's not having an intern or a co-op student isn't free labor. It costs you. So just in time and training and the right mix. But I don't see that we have a lack of talent of people who are very media savvy attending the college right now, even though we have a small enrollment. From what I've seen that they've put out there, there's a really great group of people out there.
Good.
I'm really inspired by that. So I'd like to maybe open it up to some questions. I think there have been a couple of questions in chat. I don't know, Jesse, is someone monitoring that chat? I can open it up, but I hate to do all right. So I see that. Go ahead, Jesse.
There's one question from Robert.
Robert Goldsmith.
Goldsmith, thank you.
Yeah.
About the financing of the documentaries, which I think he talked about already.
Yeah, but Robert, why don't you ask your question directly? I think you can unmute yourself. And
I'm unmuted. So it seems like a lot of it is distributed without generating any revenue. So if you're not really generating enough revenue to pay for the films, or you are, but are you generating enough revenue to pay for the films?
No, the films are free, which I think is critically essential and important. You're not going to reach people who disagree with you. You're not going to reach so-called low information voters. You're not even going to reach people who care. But, if you had to spend $8 or $15 or $20, whatever it is, to see it, or to be on a streaming service, it would work against our commitment. So we have to fundraise.
I'm not interested in individuals, but what motivates, is it at the individual level, organizations that provide a lot of the funding?
It's basically 4 parts. There are foundations, which are great and so helpful, because sometimes you can get a multi-year grant. There are what's called high net worth individuals. There are small donors. We have almost 16, 17,000 people who give from $5 to $100 once a year or monthly even, which is even better. And then we sometimes will do for hire with like-minded organizations that might, the ACLU, New Jersey had us do something, and others have had us do particular pieces that they're able to finance, that we're able to use our expertise. So those 4 streams are basically the way that we're able to continue to exist.
Can I quickly tell you something humorous about yourself, which you probably don't know on the internet? All my logiciel is in French. So when I looked you up in Wikipedia, I get the French version I get a French version. It's not a translation, but it's what's available on Wikipedia about you in French. You know, in Wikipedia, those little side panels giving you a very brief summary. Well, your distinction in French is that you were the worst director, nominated the worst director in 1981. However, in English, it's buried. It's buried in the summary. Yeah. I thought that was humorous.
Well, so what were you directing in 1981?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, the French, you know, I'm sorry, Robert, if you're French or so, but, you know, French have their own sense
I'll survive.
of,
Robert, can I ask you a question?
yes,
It's
who's
Oz
this?
Scott.
Hi,
Yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, my camera's not on. There it is, better. Okay.
there you are.
You mentioned TikTok, and I understand those 4 categories that you look for fundraising. But when I've got my friend's daughter is making money off of Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. And I'm just wondering, where does that start to, you know, how do we tap into monies like that? Where, you know, because I'm looking at all the ads on YouTube. I'm looking at all the ads everywhere else. How can you tap into that? Have you investigated that? I don't know. So
Yeah. It's a challenge. You know, you've seen probably this outburst of articles about, quote, influencers, which are people who make money from TikTok or Instagram. I mean, it tends to be not strong political stuff. It's usually music or food or fashion, or on TikTok, it's quite mind-boggling, some of the things that get literally millions of views. TikTok is for people who don't have the attention span to deal with Instagram, which is
but let me take it another step farther. GoFundMe. There's a lot, you know, I mean, I did a whole, you know, I think at the Directors Guild, they had some GoFundMe people coming in and telling us how Hava Nagila, they were trying to put together a film, and they put the sizzle reel together, and because people were interested in where Hava Nagila comes from and where it's been and all the other things, they were raising money. They were raising good money and decent money. The social, you know, I mean, this crowdfunding seems to be generating finances.
It does generate some money. The question when you're trying to be an ongoing entity versus a one-shot is there's only so many hours, and a lousy foundation grant is $25,000. If you get $25,000 through crowdfunding, you know, you're very happy. I'm not saying it's not, it does have value. For us, we have found the time needed to invest in it doesn't yet pay off to the degree we need it to pay off if we're going to be able to continue on an ongoing basis. If I was doing one film that had a well-known something like Hava Nagila, or, you know, some kind of buzzy, catchy, easily understandable, I think it would make more sense. But I you know, when we started doing drones, I can't imagine we would have raised a nickel on a crowdfunding. You know, it's. But having said that, I hope we'll be able to have the ability to do some of that. But right now, we're jammed in trying to.
But you've got this small little crowd right here. So
yes.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yes, David.
I wonder, are you knowledgeable about the streaming services Canopy and Hoopla?
Yes.
And isn't that a place where you could get some income?
You know, this, not to make my challenges anyone else's, but it's not totally clear. And whenever possible, now, you know, I've got a job, and the job is, even though I'm a volunteer, is to keep this organization going. But what I want to do is I want to make our films available for free on Canopy, so that any school, anywhere, can use it and see it and play it. Now, can I do that? Can we do that and then fundraise for it? Or do we have to put up a wall where the only people who can see the films are those who can pay? So, for example, with our educators program, I'm insanely passionate about getting the films to community colleges. They don't have the resources that the fancy four-year colleges have, right? We need to make those available for the community colleges for free. Can we do that and then fundraise for it? So it's not, you know, it's more art than science, but it's a constant debate, trying not to put up walls, believing that the more people we can reach, the more who can see the films, that then we will find funders who will say, that's amazing. You reached 1 million people with voter suppression. Yes, we want to give you the resources for 2022. Had we put up walls, whether it be Canopy or TikTok or wherever, we wouldn't have reached that number of eyeballs. But
well, how many libraries, what fraction of the libraries in the United States do you think subscribe to Canopy and Hoopla? Because
I don't know.
It doesn't cost a library card holder anything. It's paid for out of library budgets.
Correct, but when in dealing with Canopy, and we are dealing with them now, trying. It's taken 6 months to make an arrangement, but as the challenge has been finding ways to work with, and I'm secondhand on this, so I may not have it 100% accurate, but finding ways to work with Canopy to maximize the opportunity for the most people to see the film. And if we get some income, great. But, you know, I say our goal always is social impact. And sometimes the need to monetize, like with the commercial places, gets in the way of people seeing it. I understand that.
Yeah, well, maybe you
Rob,
can
can I ask a question from a government point of view? Back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, we were getting a lot of fundraising. You know, we were getting National Endowment for the Arts, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and there was a lot of government money coming into the arts. Where is that now? Do you know? It's not there at all?
I don't know. I mean, we've not pursued, we haven't, I'm not aware that any of that has been available to us. And, you know, when you do somewhat controversial stuff, where you're very controversial, when you're attacking some of the corporations and some of the government policies, we have gotten Ford Foundation money over the years.
Yeah, I don't think the NEA or any of those have been well funded since maybe the 70s or so. I think that's one thing that they've chipped away at year after year after year. You know, even like public television, you know, was a bastard to many people. But I was just wondering, maybe you should have a director's cut, you know, and maybe you can monetize the director's cut with, you know, added information that would still allow all the free and the wide reaching, and you know, people always pay for a premium thing. So that's my
Yeah.
thought.
I'll ask a quick question to Robert.
Who's this?
Peter Crossman. I just turned my camera on. I was being very quiet because my wife was sleeping. I'm in Hong Kong working on a TV series. I'm going to be talking to the group in 3 weeks' time, I think. Right. But I was knocked out when I saw your first film, which that I was exposed to, which was the Iraq for Sale film.
Thank you.
I remember thinking, how can I get this out to more people? What I did was I sent the physical copy to friends and had sort of a quorum. But you have an uncanny ability to anticipate these national, you know, crises before they really, something happens out of the blue. And what your films tell me is there's nothing that happens out of the blue. You're always about what's systemic about these problems. And, you know, the Iraq one was so galling because you see how little we understand about how that war, the underpinnings of that war. It was just unbelievable expose. So, and without Fox, you know, you anticipated what's become, you know, a huge crisis. I mean, how do we get a network this is almost criminal, you know, what Rupert Murdoch is doing here, you know, and, you know, creating this sort of, you know, metastasizing cancer in the form of ignorance and, you know, dissuading people from even listening to what's out there and real. But I thought your spokesperson that I saw regarding to your last one, which is a racially charged or whatever your latest, you had a young lady who's going into government, and she was very inspiring. She was one of your, I think she's one of your employees. And I forgot her name, but I saw the film associated with it. And I was just thinking, you know, you are such a great resource for these issues. What's your relationship to the media? Like the, you know, MSNBCs, or, you know, someone who would put you on just to be a spokesperson for all this knowledge that you have from having researched these things. Have you been doing those, or?
Well, first of all, thank you. You know, Iraq for Sale was one of the films that has a deep, deep place in my heart, because I think it was one of the times when we were more effective in making the systemic nature of greed, profiteering, and capitalism clearer than we've been able to do maybe in some other films. We have a press team that's based in Washington, D.C., that we work with, and their job is to help us get as much attention as possible. With the shrinkage of outlets, corporations, you know, and the monopolization issues, it's become harder. So it's more of a challenge. With racially charged, we've tried a different strategy, partly driven by it's the right thing to do, and partly driven by press. So we're doing a series of premieres all around the country with different district attorneys. So we did one in Boston with Rollins, and it was very effective and got a lot of press there. She just showed the whole film to the entire staff of district attorneys who work for her. Then we did one in San Francisco with Chesa Bodine. Then we did one 2 days ago with Tom Steyer, with Gascon. Tom Steyer participated in that. And that's been pretty effective in getting some local press. We got some TV on the one here in LA. We got a LA Times piece, which was very helpful to the overall issue, because Robin Abkarian, the columnist, wrote it from the point of view that what the film makes clear is the misdemeanor policy is actually making us less safe, which to me was like gold in terms of what we're trying to talk about. But like each piece of the work, it's time intensive, and it's not easy or simple. I've been frankly shocked at how resistant television has been to so many of the great personal stories that are in the films, right? You would think they would leap to we've done the casting for them. Now, when we had, you know, all the women who Trump had groped and abused, we had a press conference, there must have been 40 cameras and reporters and stuff. Other than that, it's a constant slog. We had the psychologists a year and a half ago, talking about Trump's mental state, zero press pickup. But I've learned, even though it, is hard, you keep going. And then, it ultimately, it got the attention. So it's challenging and interesting, but time intensive to try to get the media attention that's absolutely necessary, because we never have a penny for P&A. That's prints and ads money, for those of you not in the film business. So we have to get groups supporting us and celebrities and advocates and elected officials. You know, many of them we've worked with on different projects.
I'll do a follow-up, which is the Outfoxed film and your background there. What hope do you see going forward for us to bring, you know, Fox down, you know, in the way that perhaps the Dominion lawsuit might have? You know, there was the similarity to the red slime reporting that happened and actually was a successful case. I don't know what's happened with the Dominion case, and I know they have a phalanx of lawyers, but is there any hopeful signs you've seen that indicate the weakness of Fox going forward, or any hopeful signs that, you know, there's drop off? I mean, it's just lunacy as far as I can see, but you know, here people are glued to it, and they manage to put on a circus every night with just more and more audacious nonsense. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, you know, the fundamental problem is you can't counter emotion with reason. You can't, I don't believe, you can't counter fear with facts, and you can't counter terror with a 5-point plan. And many of our efforts have been thoughtful and rational, but are not going to be effective against what's essentially an appeal to the worst fears and terrors and anxieties. That's on the large level. On the specific and it's an ongoing issue, and we're going to be struggling with it for a while. The most hopeful maybe thing, I think, around Fox right now, this is where the for-profit, AKA capitalism, can sometimes be effective, is the way Fox makes most of their money is carriage fees. It's not the advertisers. It's that the different outlets pay Fox to carry it on the different entities that distribute. And it's possible that pressure on some of those outlets may have an effect in hurting Fox's bottom line. The minute the bottom line is hurt, you know, there'll be changes. But right now, it makes a lot of money for Murdoch. Yes, he's conservative, but I think his biggest value is profit. And if the profit starts to get really weakened, diminished, then we may see some changes.
Well, we can
Thank
hope.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We can hope, but I don't have a lot of faith. I think once people have been conned, they don't give up their con. You know, you still have people believing that the Nigerian email scams, they're going to come through. That doesn't have a lot of. I don't have a lot of hope in that. See, someone do you have any focus on QAnon in possible? I don't know, Jesse, what was your question?
I just wondered if QAnon is reading QAnon and Fox and all of the follow-ons to Fox. They're all distributing strange things, and it's hard to understand how people believe that. I wonder if QAnon is an appropriate topic.
It's certainly an appropriate topic. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have the resources to do that. And I'm hopeful with QAnon, then that's sort of more traditional press are doing deeper dives and further investigations, and that they'll be able to do that. But I would love to dig into that and several others where I've wanted for a while to be able to have somebody go undercover. And, you know, there's, because the technology is so amazing today. When we did the NRA film, I went to a gun show, and it was this weird thing because I had the hidden camera, which was in the pen. And, you know, I'm walking around with it, and I feel like everybody's looking at me. Of course, they're not. But it's strange what it does to the psyche. But the technology offers us great opportunities, but we haven't had the resources to do it. I mean, there's a variety of projects where undercover work could be very, very helpful. And again, I hope in the future we'll be able to do that.
Well, I wish I had a second life, or maybe in my next life, I'll volunteer to work, because I find it very interesting and really critical to our democracy that we keep on being able to create these documentaries and distribute them. It's a wonderful job you've done. It's getting
Sure.
close till 6 o'clock, so I'd like to maybe draw it down, and see if there are any additional questions from the
I had one.
oh, go ahead, please.
From the point of view of a scientist, the tallest pole of all is climate change. I wondered if you've thought about that as a subject.
I should be fired from my job if I hadn't thought about it. Yes, I've thought about it. I've not found a way to do something there that is not already being done. It's obviously a critical issue. There is also enormous amount of resources, funding, groups, and people working on that. And again, I remain hopeful that there will be continued impact. Particularly, it's interesting in the younger generation, it really, really has become a visceral issue. And that's where the culture leads the politics. And I think if you make the culture change or the narrative change or whatever label you want to put on it, that will lead to the legislation, policy, and change in behavior. So I continue to look for it. As I was saying before, the challenge is which projects to do, therefore which projects don't get done. And it's by no means the perfect answer.
One angle would be to do something on an organization that's working the problem called Citizens Climate Lobby. It's quite different than most organizations, and I think very effective.
Okay, thank you. I'll research it.
So I have a question off topic. And that is, what kind of response did you get on your survey, Peter?
Oh, I see. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Robert, in some of the emails, I sent a link out to the group there to sort of gauge as we move into in-person meetings or meetups or so, where and how many and where and how often. So I sent out that survey. So Rasha, I'm still collecting the data. I've had about 24, maybe 30 responses, which it's about normal for a survey. It's about 10%. So I haven't put that data yet together. I will get it out, and I will distribute the information, through the emails and on the next call. So hopefully you've participated in the survey, and if any of you on the call here have not yet, every response is valuable, whether or not you can make an in-person meeting or not. So
I found today the attendance to be very disappointing for somebody with as much to tell us as Robert Greenwald has, and the maximum number of participants we had, including Robert Greenwald himself, was 14. Now that is, considering this is Los Angeles, with, we always had problems in the past when we tried to have a gathering. The best we ever did was when John Lithgow did his thing at my friend's house. We had 75 people. We were hoping for 200, but we were charging $250 per person. But anyway, besides the fact, with only 14 participants and in virtual, when it's so easy, when we don't have to travel around this huge metropolis, And, never, people didn't want to come to Palos Verdes. They consider it, off the map somewhere.
Well, that is a challenge. Of course, when it was first announced, it was new and everyone was at home. And that is a problem now, is because so many people are now taking the opportunity to go out to dinner, go visit with friends, and that's one of the reasons I sent out the survey, is like maybe there's a better time. The nice thing is that we have a bank of 5 videos of these meetings, right? So although this exposure was less, there is the opportunity to increase the exposure on this. And another thing that's sort of going on within the Antioch Alumni Association is that we're putting together a speakers bureau, so to speak, right? Where we'll be inviting guests like Robert and Victoria and Peter and other people who have participated here to be available to and it's not just LA, we've got people from San Francisco, New York, and Chicago, right? So that we can get this critical mass of people who are engaged and who have good stories to tell. And that way we can do, college-wide type of things, whether it's through an alumni group or a monthly or whatever we develop, right? This is really laying the groundwork for a much larger thing that I'm planning on helping to expand throughout the
We need to get help from the people, and as Joan, and I see she wants to speak, and I'll get off in a minute, but we need to get help from the people in San Francisco too. They seem to have a great group and a large attendance for everything that they do.
Well, all those radicals from Ohio moved to San Francisco. That's what I think happened. So,
Joan, what did you want to?
Jones, you have to unmute yourself, please. A moment. Technical difficulty.
Okay, here we go. I'm unmuted. Okay, let me just, for the record, we had 15 because my daughter is here and she listened to every word with interest in the Boston area. So I raised my hand because I was hoping that you would indulge me if I do a 2-minute commercial for Antioch, which I like to do whenever we have a gathering. I work for the advancement office now. You might remember that I was president some time ago, but now I am still working for Antioch, or I should say again working for Antioch, picking people's pockets on behalf of the college. We have to keep the doors open and the lights on. I just want to say that it's the end of the fiscal year. At the beginning of June, we still had to make up about $100,000 to make budget, and June 30th is the end of the fiscal year. So my commercial today is, please don't ever skip a year. Contribute every single year. It makes a difference. And the number and percentage of alumni who support the college is something that foundations pay attention to. So don't skip a year. If you haven't made a contribution this year, please do before June 30th. And if you feel especially generous, a lot of us didn't go to the theater, we didn't eat out, we didn't travel. We saved a little bit of money last year, and maybe you can give some of that to Antioch. It would be very much appreciated. My view is that every dollar that we contribute to Antioch educates another Antiochian, which the world needs. That's the commercial.
And when I made calls for to get people to donate a few years back, one of the things we said and we told people was, even if you only give $5, or $10 if you can't give very much, just the number of people, as Joan said, the number of people who contribute. And they don't count the amount, they just count the bodies who contribute. And that counts for, that foundations look at before they give out their grants.
So
Thank you, Rasha.
Yeah, thank you, Joan, too, and Rasha. One of the things the LA chapter is doing is trying to update our email list. You know, I have probably, or we have, I don't know, over 500 or 600 names of alumni, but only about 150 or 200 email addresses, right? And we don't even know how many of those email addresses are valid email addresses. So, you know, yeah, it sounds like I sent out, 300 emails for this meeting, but, 100 might be right, you don't even know if they live in LA anymore. So there's a lot of work that the alumni group has to do. You know, we sort of lost a lot of forward motion when we started up, the university at that time didn't really transfer a lot of information, and it cost a lot of money to keep your donor list up to date. So, that's something we're working on, and that's a high priority of mine too, is to figure out a way to reconnect, because, if we can't bother people with an email about Antioch, they're not going to think about us. So, Joan, thank you for your outreach to everyone and the work you've done. I'd like to end it by thanking Robert so much, taking time. I know he's a very busy person. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate, but we and the future viewers of this really thank you for your time, your insight, and the contributions you're doing to democracy in this United States. So have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's good to meet you on Zoom, and see you on the battlefield.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for arranging it.
My greatest pleasure. All right. And we'll see Peter next month. So.